Last August 12th, the state of Baja California was plagued by arson, which resulted in 30 cars being set on fire and the blocking of highways in the area. During the same Friday night after the occurrence of these reprehensible events, the state and municipal governments published in the official bulletin certain measures to reestablish order. The first was the closure of business, and the inhabitants of the state were asked to remain in their homes until further notice. The government of President Manuel Lopez Obrador blamed the chaos on the powerful Jalisco Cartel New Generation. On the other hand, the following day, 17 alleged perpetrators of these acts of violence were captured. 3 of those arrested were allegedly part of the Cjng. It's presumed that these acts are the result of clashes between different clandestine groups fighting for control of the area. What should the government do regarding these events? Are the authorities too soft on cartels? How do you think that they need to act? We read you. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. The wave of blockades and fires that occurred this week in different parts of the country reflects a series of episodes that suggest they were connected. The first of these incidents occurred in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, where members of the Los Mexicales group decided to directly attack the civilian population, killing innocent people. These murders were in response to the homicide of 2 of their members in Social Reinsertion Center 3. The attacks in Ciudad Juarez took place just 3 days after a series of blockades and fires in Jalisco and Guanajuato, where members of Jalisco Cartel New Generation took control of the streets in response to a Mexican army operation aimed at capturing high-ranking members of the organization. Among them, Ricardo Ruiz Velasco, El Doble R. Through messages on social networks, they alerted the population of a curfew starting at 10 p.m. on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They made it clear in their message that the objective wasn't to harm innocent civilians, only to send a message to the government, since some time ago the state published a list of wanted individuals. Among them, some important members of the Cjng. All of this was also a demand for the release of elements of this organization that were detained by the government, but they didn't clarify if this warning had any relation to the episodes that occurred in Jalisco and Guanajuato. Shortly before dark, several of Mexicali's main avenues were shot at, and masked men intercepted urban passenger trucks, unloading people without harming them and setting fire to the units. Their belongings weren't stolen either. The cities of Tijuana, Mexicali, Rosarito, Tecate, and Ensenada were in the state of Baja California were the scene of violent events on Friday when alleged members of the Cjng set fire to 24 private vehicles and public transportation in the middle of the streets. Only 1 person was injured in the events in Mexicali. The preliminary reports indicates that in Tijuana, at least 6 cabs were set on fire to block busy streets. In some cases, only the driver, and in others, also the passengers were taken out of the vehicles, without being assaulted. In Tecate, the first data to show that 2 cargo trucks were intentionally set on fire. One of them on the Tijuana-Tecate highway. In Ensenada, the free route from Tecate to Valle de Guadalupe was closed due to the threats of situations similar to those in other cities in the state. In the community of El Salsal, a truck was set on fire. The Secretariat of Security and Citizen Protection stated that 17 arrests were made, of which 7 were in Tijuana, 4 in Rosarito, 4 in Mexicali, and 2 in Ensenada. Among those arrested, 3 were identified as members of the Cjng. The streets of Tijuana dawned on Saturday with little presence of vehicles and pedestrians. At the same time, dozens of police and military personnel were conducting patrols in some parts of the city where the attacks occurred. Around 350 additional soldiers were sent to Tijuana on Saturday, and 3,000 soldiers and 2,000 police were deployed throughout the state to restore order. For her part, the state governor, Marina del Pilar, pledged to apply the full force of our government so that there is peace and we find those responsible for these attacks. On the other hand, the governor also said that on Saturday, she was in coordination with the transportation sector to gradually re-establish transfers and reactivate transportation throughout the entity, and added that highways, toll booths, and health centers are operating normally. The U.S. consulate said in a statement that they were aware of reports of multiple vehicle fires, road blockades, and heavy police activity in several cities in the region, and urged its employees to take shelter. After the violent events, the streets of Tijuana were desolated and public transportation was withdrawn, a situation that affected some residents of the border city, who had to spend long hours looking for a way to get home. The head of the National Defense Secretariat, Sedena, said that the violence in Baja California was due to acts of publicity by criminal groups to demonstrate their power or send a message to their opponents. On the other hand, this message would also be directed at state authorities, demanding the release of members of the Jalisco Cartel New Generation. These acts might also be a consequence of some measures taken by the national government. One of these would be the inclusion of certain Cjng members in a list of persons wanted by the state. This position would go against the policy of embraces, not bullets, abrazos no balazos, established by the current national government, and would have generated, in part, the events of last August 12th. Tractor trucks, cargo trucks, freight trucks, passenger buses, private vehicles, cars, and vans were among the vehicles involved in the accidents. 17 in Tijuana, 2 in Mexicali, 2 in Tecate, 4 in Ensenada, and 3 in Rosarito. The violence also caused the closure of businesses, mainly in tourist areas, and the suspension of public transportation during the early hours of Saturday morning, which generated chaos for people who began to leave their jobs at night. This Saturday, the streets of Tijuana looked deserted during the first hours of the day, but then they were reactivated. Of those arrested in the capital city of Mexicali, 3 people were captured in a black van after having set fire to a passenger truck, while in Rosarito, 2 were arrested trying to flee in a red vehicle. In the municipality of Ensenada, 2 more people were detained in a sand-colored vehicle, carrying ski masks and gasoline cans. No details were provided about the rest of the detainees, but they were all handed over to the corresponding authorities. In most of the fire attacks, the reports shared that drivers were robbed of their vehicles by armed persons under threat. In response to these events, public transportation drivers decided not to continue with their night routes, which generated saturation of people and chaos in several areas of the city. Some citizens showed their solidarity by offering their vehicles to take them from one point to another, while some also used their homes for this purpose. The Autonomous University of Baja California, the UABC, also suspended classes immediately and set up one of the gymnasiums so that students who could no longer go home could stay on the campus. Several businesses, bars in the tourist area, and self-service stores suspended their activities until further notice, due to the uncertainty generated by a piece of false news about a supposed curfew that was discarded by the authorities. The U.S. consulate in Tijuana warned its personnel about the violent events and urged them to take precautions in time. And even though one of the fires occurred around a few meters from the border points of the El Chaparral and San Isidro, the border crossing continued to operate normally. In addition, business organizations such as the Maquiladora and Export Industry Association, the Index, and sports organizations decided to suspend events and sports competitions scheduled for this day. This Saturday, through a communiqué, the Archbishopric of Tijuana condemned the violent acts and the events that took place in the state and urged citizens to remain calm and be informed on time to avoid false or alarmist messages. The Mexican president's visit to Tijuana after the wave of violence in Baja California and 4 other states was marked by protests and demonstrations by citizens. Since Friday, August 19th, hundreds of people gathered outside the Morelos barracks, dressed in black to demand more security actions from AMLO and make even special requests to the president and the governor, Marina del Pilar Avila. It was a situation whose motive was due to circumstances unrelated to issues that occurred in the territory of our state. There is no reason, neither apparent nor real, for which Baja California has been given any reason, said the president. Lopez Obrador's visit to Tijuana took place one day after Senator Jaime Bonilla Valdez accused the governor of Baja California, Marina del Pilar Avila, of having a pact with cartels, but violating it, which generated last week's wave of violence. In this regard, Lopez Obrador denied the existence of a pact between the governor and the Cjng and reiterated the support of both the party and the federal government itself to the official. We come to tell her that she's not alone, that the federal government will always support her. She was democratically elected by the people of Baja California and is the legal and legitimately constituted governor. She has our support, and even more, our sympathy. What can the authorities do to avoid more situations like these? Leave your comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to know more about this world.